of the key roles and responsibilities given to pastors of the church is to plan worship, to lead worship. We work with liturgies, we work with altar guilds, we work with other staff, trying to shape the life of the community that gathers for worship Sunday by Sunday. Indeed, even before my YMCA conversation took place, I look forward to preaching this morning on worship, looking at the mystical and stunning experience, vision, whatever we call it, of Isaiah in the temple from the day's first reading. I have already sensed a golden opportunity to celebrate God's power to reveal himself and touch the lives of his people. What is your sense about the issue of how spaces and places and people open doors for powerful experiences of worship? Are such things non-players, with God doing all the heavy lifting? Or are such things crucial in enabling people to look for God, to listen to God, to be responsive to God? Or, when all is said and done, are we who ask such questions mere mortals who are incapable of figuring these things out in any complete way? I'm wondering what you're thinking, and I suspect you're thinking different thoughts from person to person. Obviously, spaces and places are important to us insofar as our apprehension of God is concerned. We've just completed a renovation of our sanctuary, and in doing this, we gave considerable attention to doing it right. We've just completed a renovation of our chapel, less extensive, less expensive, and less of note to the congregation because we don't use that space as much. But that chapel also is a gathering place for people who are hoping to center their lives on God's gifts and God's Word. There are local meccas that we Lutherans care about and are drawn to for spiritual enrichment. They include the Lutheran Seminary at Gettysburg, especially the chapel, Camp Nawakwa, Camp Marlow Ridge, in two not-so-far-away places, where wonderful things happen regularly in these places with and for the people of God. Many of you know that I go to Camp Luther every year, another church camp, another place that has been a powerful Mecca in my life and ministry. There's a more ecumenical Mecca for my life, which has been a special place for me, and that is on the campus of Brook Lane Medical Services near Leitersburg, where pastors are pastored and blessed and fed in a lovely but simple chapel. Many who have been at places and spaces like these would agree that God speaks loudly and clearly in most of the gatherings that take place there. I'm not prepared to give a final answer, as Regis Philbin once stated it, not once, 100 so many times. I think we need to live with the questions about why God seems to have a megaphone in some times and places, but seems to have a seriously muffled voice in so many others. Some worship settings turn me on and bless me more than others. To put it otherwise, some worship services inspire me greatly, while others leave me cold. If you would agree with such statements that there's a great variance from place to place, from time to time, about how loudly God speaks, how clearly we can hear him, then what are we saying about God's place in worship? It is apparent to me that such church communities as have powerful worship do so in different ways, and different people have different regards for how they do it. Quakers, for instance, value worship very much, but not at all in the same way that liturgical churches value worship. And even liturgical churches have quite different understandings and practices. Some Lutheran, Roman Catholic, and Episcopal congregations regard themselves as low church, while others regard themselves as high church. I've not heard of any that call themselves middle church, but I suspect that that's where most of us really are most of the time. And then we get to those church traditions that value very highly altar calls. We don't have those here, unless you consider the Holy Communion an altar call, which it is in some ways. Or other congregations are into speaking in tongues as part and parcel of good worship. So the variances are many within and among the traditions of the church. And what I've said about Christian worship could also be said about Jewish worship and about Muslim worship as well, insofar as preferences and practices are concerned. I would imagine that the worship leaders in those places could raise the very same questions about God's role in worship that I have raised with you this morning. How much of this is human? How much of this is divine? Whether or not we have firm answers for questions like these, we will continue to work at our worship, because worship is a fundamental right and need for those who want to know and be true and close to God. We really have no choice but to work at it and do the best we can with it. As a matter of fact, I will be working with the congregation's Worship and Music Committee this afternoon. Our monthly meetings are where we gather to take care of business, providing worship that will feed and lead the people of God who join us for worship in ways that are good for the cause of Jesus Christ. Let me give you a bird's eye view of how we will spend an hour or so together this afternoon. We will reflect together about our new Evangelical Lutheran worship hymn. Who is loving it? Who is giving it a gong? How can our use of it be revised to be more joyfully received and used? Which of the other settings in that book, there are 10 of them, do we also want to try? Do we need to reformat our bulletin or make some selective deletions of parts of the liturgy? Do we want to sing or say more parts of it than we do? Do we want to have more variety between the early service and the second service of the day? And on I could go. Consistent with this, we will also ask each other whether we have done all that we should to invite and encourage interested persons to attend the workshop that is being held at the seminary chapel in Gettysburg on Saturday on the new hymnal, our use of it, and why and wherefore these choices have been made that finally wound up in this beautifully bound book. The committee will also be asked to discuss our plans for Lent, especially Holy Week. In the course of the meeting, I will make a report to the committee, as will our choir director and organist. Committee members will also receive the concerns of our ushers, as well as the altar guild, coordinators and trainers of acolytes and communion assistants. Perhaps some of you here would like to get in on the action of this fine and key committee in the life of our congregation. If so, please say so. You are welcome to join us. You can make a note on the attendance pad that you're ready and going to do that, or speak to me or one of the ushers after worship today, or simply come to the church parlor at 2 o'clock this afternoon for the meeting. It's a fine group. You might make some new friends there, might help to make your worship life more joyful and meaningful for you, more useful to God for His purposes in the lives of our church family. Having made this pitch for the hands-on work which blesses our worship life, I also feel a need to state a disclaimer. No worship committee planned the wonderful experience of being called and blessed by God that was experienced by the prophet Isaiah according to the first reading of today. And this is a partial answer to the question I raised about God's role in the worship